there. Welcome to Here's What I Learned. I'm Jackie Hayes, a systems strategist, unapologetic, smutty romantasy lover, Dungeons and Dragons geek, and your no BS guide to building a business that works for you. This is the place where we swap stories, share lessons, and get real about the highs and lows of creating a life and business that actually feels good. No cookie cutter advice here, just honest conversations about what's working, what's not, and how to rewrite the rules to fit your version of success. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and let's dive in. Today on Here's What I Learned, I am talking with Kirsten Ziegler, and she helps female identifying small business owners build the culture of their dreams through consulting, workshops, and projects. In working with her, they identify their business needs and create the right roles, which allows them to hire the right people to grow their business in a way that's directly connected to their vision and their values. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Kirsten, what is something that you have been learning about lately?
Something that I have been learning about, it's been a personal journey, is doing things that make me feel joyful as opposed to doing things I feel like I have to do. That was one of I don't really do New Year's resolutions because, I like to just operate in, okay, this is something I'd like to do moving forward, just in general, no expiration date. But that's what I decided for myself to focus on for this coming year and hopefully forever. Easier said than done.
What things have you found so far?
I would say, it's really interesting around projects or even like family obligations. This is where it comes up the most, like family obligations and then work. Those are the two areas. And so I have, from a business perspective, have been trying not to offer help in areas where I actually don't want to help, where in the past I'm just like, I'll do anything, and then be like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good in my gut. Like, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm really like pushing myself in ways that I don't even enjoy. And so that's something I'm paying attention to more because, you want to push yourself to do things outside of your comfort zone, but you can't continuously do that if it's not bringing you growth or joy. And then with family, stuff, family obligations, it's more like parental, where I'm like, you know what? I have my own life. I can put my foot down every once in a while and not feel guilty. And so that's been a little more of a struggle, to be honest. But, I really want to operate in a way where I just don't do things out of feeling bad, right? Like I'm doing this because I just feel so bad that I should. So it's been interesting.
I think that's one of those lifelong lessons that you would just never stop learning. So
definitely. And I think that last year I was really burnt out from a variety, personal, professional, and that's what kind of pushed me to this point. I am a recovering codependent, so I just want everyone around me to be happy and thriving. And so working hard to shift that this way a little.
So it sounds to me like this lesson that you're trying to learn right now, in particular to your business, leads right into my next question, which is when I say business your way, what does that mean to you?
That is such a good question. So I'm going to start from a while ago, but I promise I'll get to the point. I was born on it. No, I have been in human resources for 13 years and never in my wildest dreams thought I would have my own business. That was never like the overarching goal. It was just to do something that I liked, which was work with people. And I've always operated, and my core values are empathy, ethics, and authenticity. And I've always operated out of that place. But through a series of different corporate jobs that I held, I found that I was really losing those elements of myself. And it was, I almost didn't realize it until it just went too far in the wrong direction. Working in companies, as a human resources professional, You're there to advocate for both the business and the employees equally. But if you don't have the right leadership team above you, you're not able to successfully do your job, at least to my standards, where it's, like supporting the people as well as the business. To me, it's a chicken or egg. You can't have one without the other. The business has to pay the people to do the job, and the people have to do the job in order for the business to make money. So they're important. It's important, right? And so, my last gig in corporate, we were not aligned by any means. And, I was trying my best to do what I thought was ethical. And they wanted to check a box. And I was so fed up by that point that it led me to start my own business without even thinking about it. I was fueled on energy and a little bit of anger, and tiny bit of spite, but a lot of excitement, all mixed together. And I started my HR consulting business. And, to this day, I live by those values still, which I'm now able to practice and work with leaders that feel similarly, right? Like, I don't want everyone to be carbon copy of me that I work with. I want different ideas and perspectives, but you have to be open. I don't work with people who aren't willing to treat their people like people and build equitable, thriving teams. Those are my only restrictions. I don't care what industry you're in, what size company, and that's how I'm doing business my way, by being able to be selective about who I support and then, really support them to my best ability.
I know that a lot of us, especially those of us that have been in some form of corporate world, there's some people who have never had to, and I envy them, but HR is not that's not the department you ever want to talk to. Yeah.
No.
So,
but it shouldn't be that way, in my opinion. Like, as an HR person in a corporate setting, I was so lonely because no one wanted to come hang out.
You're the pariah.
Right. I wanted to talk to everybody. Like, I wanted to know about everything that was going on with everybody's day to day, not to use against them. You know what I mean? And so there's definitely a disconnect. And I think that some companies do it right. I'm not saying that every company is like that, but unfortunately, the ones that I worked directly in, I didn't have such great experiences.
So a lot of the listeners are solopreneurs or small business owners with, small teams. They probably hear HR consultants or somebody who specializes in HR, and they're like, I'm never going to need to work with her. Why might they need to?
Okay, so I always say, if you are thinking about even hiring your first employee or you have employees, you need HR support. So you need to not only make sure that you're doing everything from a compliance standpoint, but that you're also hiring the right people and making sure those people stick around if you want them to, you may not, but I find that businesses come to me when there's a crisis, and I always want to encourage people to be more proactive. So if you think about, you have an employee, but there's some struggles with them that you're feeling, there's tension from both sides, things aren't getting done to your standards. And, I've seen a lot of times people come to me and say, I need to fire this person. And as we go through the conversations and dig into it more, a lot of times it can be solved, with simple communication, expectations. And so, if there's ever a little bit of doubt in your mind, or that feeling of like something's not right with it or going well with this person, reach out to an HR consultant immediately, because you can most likely just squash that issue in advance. Not all the time, but every situation is different. But I've also seen, business owners with the purest and best of intentions just not realize that they were supposed to be doing things. Every state has its own set of compliance laws, which makes it so hard and frustrating. And so, I've seen, I had a client once who had an employee suing them because they weren't being provided paid sick leave, because the employer, it's not that they were trying they just had no idea that that state required it. So it's definitely worth talking to an HR consultant or any HR professional if you're thinking about hiring at least one person. And I always recommend have an employee handbook in place, one or more employees, because you're getting your standards right off the bat set there. You're making sure you're compliant. And it's an understanding to protect your employee and protect your business too. It works for both parties. So I really think that having that document is super, super important.
So a lot of folks in the online space, they work primarily with contractors and not employees. One of the things that I have experienced in the past, and I know I'm not the only one, is when the business owner doesn't understand the difference between a contractor and an employee. And so, oversteps the lines, doesn't realize it. And I know there are some situations where they've then gotten sued by a contractor because they were being treated like an employee. And then if you're, working with people remotely, it's not just about where you live, then is my understanding as well.
Yeah.
So what are some of the misconceptions that a lot of like online business owners have?
Oh my gosh, these are the best points to bring up because I talk to people about this all day long. I'm actually creating a course around this exact thing because I've seen it become such it's an issue. Okay, so contractors versus employees. There are a few different tests. The IRS and the Department of Labor both have their own set of tests. One, I think, is like 11 questions. The other is 6 questions. So what I have kind of come to understand from an employment law perspective is that those questions themselves change. Usually, and they haven't been affected yet, but like usually it's per administration, but generally the theme of them doesn't change. So really it's all about control, behavioral, financial, time. It's the control aspect is what I would focus on. So if you have an independent contractor, you want them to be working whenever they want, wherever they want. They should be making their own independent decisions. And they should also, I would recommend having like a time period for that contract. And they should also they should have other jobs too. They shouldn't be working for you full time. If you want more control over someone, then you need to start thinking about hiring a W-2 employee. And I mean that like it really is the best solution if you want to grow your business, because in order to grow and expand, you're going to have to, and I say control, it's not, helicoptering around this person, but it's the fact that you can say your schedule is these hours or these days. So at least you know when they're around, when they're there to work and be reliable. You can say, I want you to be at this location at this time. If you do have an in-person office, you can, check in and make comments on the work and give them guidance. And you can really be particular about what's done. And then you can also mold and grow that person to grow with your business. So if you're looking to expand, hiring an employee, even though it is a little bit, it's scary for people. And I totally understand that, right? It's a big commitment. You have to be paying that person regularly. You're paying taxes now. You have to register your business it depends on where the employee is located. And that's absolutely correct. As a remote business, you really need to be focusing on where you're hiring. If you have people set up, let's say you hire 2 different people at the same time, you need to make sure you're registered in both of those states, not only to do business, but for payroll tax, for unemployment insurance. It's not a huge list. It's scarier than it sounds, but there are things you need to do. And then when it comes to onboarding people too, you need to make sure you have the right paperwork in place and all of those things. But really, it is beneficial to have employees because you have those people then that you can rely on. Contractors are meant to work as independently as possible.
Yeah. And I'm curious then, because I see a lot of postings for, asking for, they're wanting to, bring on a contractor for something, but almost every single time they say, needs to work 9 to 5 out, and it's like, well, that's what you can you tell your employees, but you can't really insist that the contractor work 9 to 5. So
I agree with you. I mean, that to me, that's, and again, to me, that's a red flag. But again, maybe that person just doesn't know. Yeah. So it's hard to kind of, as a contractor who's like applying for those types of jobs, could be worth asking those questions if it's something you really want.
Yeah, and I know the one that I had heard about as far as like the suing, they had started to do performance reviews with the contractor.
No way.
And so they're like, okay, so if you're going to do performance reviews, that's an employee thing, not a contractor thing. And so therefore, where's my PTO? Where's my health benefit? And the company ended up, but they just didn't know. And a lot of people don't, because a lot of people come from corporate, and they don't understand the difference between employee and contractor.
And it is, I've had this conversation with a friend of mine who is also a contractor. And she does a lot of like copywriting, editorial work. And she struggles a lot with that type of role, with people treating her, like companies she works for, treating her like an employee. And she had said to me, like, I'm so tired of having to advocate for myself as a contractor all the time. And it is, I've dealt with that myself with some of my clients too, and like, no, these are my operating hours, right? Like, I will gladly, if there's an emergency, this is how we can work it, but this is how and when I operate. And I get it. It's really hard to kind of advocate for yourself. I think that, a part of setting up those initial agreements, and I've learned this, for myself, is to kind of educate the potential client too on how you work and the times you work, when you're available to them specifically, how you can be contacted. I had a client that was like, their employees were texting me at like 9 p.m. I'm like, no, this doesn't work like this. Nope.
So
where's my 401k?
Yeah. I have all my clients either email me or use Voxer, and my lovely iPhone makes it so that I no longer get notifications from Voxer as of the end of my office hours, and it will come back up when my office hours starts the next day. So
perfect. And that's, making your tech work for you, I think, is so important, not only as a contractor, but as a business owner too, like to protect your space and your time. I, was telling my husband, I'm like, you can set up do not disturbs for different things and have different apps that come up, or like block certain people during certain times. I use it all the time.
It's incredibly helpful. And especially if we're helpers and we want to help people be service providers, we sometimes forget our own boundaries, and having the tech set in place just takes care of that for us. So
absolutely. And then you don't feel bad because you don't have to do the pushing. You just don't know.
Sorry. I told you I wasn't in the office after such and such time. So
this is how I operate. So
if somebody is thinking of bringing on anybody onto their team as an employee, what would you suggest they consider? Like, what's the first things they should start to be thinking about when it comes to, I need an employee rather than a contractor?
Well, first of all, you need a job description. You need a detailed job description to set the expectations, because this is a document that will be so beneficial to the employee and the business owner. It level sets, like, this is not only what I need you to do during the hiring process, can you do it? But then once they start, it's an outline of what they're supposed to be doing and what the expectations are. And that doesn't mean that someone has to come in and, you're expecting them to hit every single point in it. It just means, let's start with the first 3 bullets on this job description. Within 6 months, I expect you to be doing this, this, and this. So I really think, like, I know it sounds so silly, but just having a job description is a huge first step. And from there, you'll also be able to determine, what does that hour commitment look like based on all of these? Like, if you are hiring a W-2 employee, it could be a part-time role. That's the other thing. A lot of people think, I have to fill up 40 hours. Like, you can hire someone part-time. on W-2. They could be an hourly employee. You can set their hours to like 20 hours a week. And that's a great entry point for you as a business owner to be managing someone, because the other part you have to consider too, hiring someone will eventually free up your time, right? So you'll be able to focus on what brings in the big bucks, as you should be. But it takes some time to get to that point. So you need to kind of set your own expectations as well. You have to be a leader. And that's a hard thing, especially if you're like aren't naturally inclined to do that or don't want to, right? Like, in order to keep that person engaged and keep them around, because the last thing you want is to have to keep hiring. It is, oh my God, not only a time suck, but you lose so much money. So if you're looking to hire, make sure you're willing to retain someone by working with them and mentoring them and providing them opportunities for growth.
When they're looking for someone, what are some things they can do to make sure they're finding the right fit?
I love to ask like behavioral questions or situation-based questions. Tell me about a time when, because then you're not hearing, somebody's not saying, oh, I would handle it this way. And, that could be, a total lie. But by asking for like real life examples, you get a better understanding of how that person works. And, you could tell by their resume, right? Like whether or not, for the most part, they have the tools, the skill set. But by asking those questions about like how they've done things in the past, or even how they would. I don't hate it. It just, you might not get as much truth, but you'll learn a lot about people. I think that it's also really important though to keep your questions consistent between candidates so that you can really evaluate them correctly. And, definitely keep the personal stuff like, if they offer stuff up, that's great. That's fine. Like, feel free to share about yourself, like that's totally okay. Just don't ask them anything about their personal life, please.
Well, and I can't believe there's been a few times in the past in interviews, the things that was asked about that were personal. I'm like, I don't even know if that question was legal. Like,
probably not. I'm here to tell you it probably was. If you're questioning it, it probably was. I was always asked, oh, do you have children? And I'm like, why are you're not just because I'm a woman?
Or do you intend to have children? I'm like,
yeah. Which is so much more problematic because they don't want to pay you any sort of leave. So they're not like, oh my God. I'm enraged.
I like how you said, make sure your questions are consistent across all the candidates, because that helps you, evaluate them on a clearer level. But I'm sure like confirmation bias or not, like just biases get in the way too. How do people avoid letting their own internalized biases, show up when they're hiring?
Oh my gosh. I love that you asked this because I just, my blog post this week was about this exactly. So I have it fresh in my mind. But first of all, by thinking about yourself first, like becoming self-aware as to what could potentially be an unconscious, I think is really important. Learning about what unconscious bias is, and then thinking about your own behaviors and what could possibly be that. And then kind of eliminating ways for stuff like that to come out, right? Like, so if somebody applies, don't go look to see what they look like, right? Don't judge anybody by their name. Just strictly look at the resume, the skill set, the cover letter, see what they read. And then, like I said, ask those same questions. There will be people that you're just going to vibe with more, right? Like it's natural that happens, but you want to kind of, gut and intellectual need to kind of like marry in this decision, like you can't go straight off of gut feeling because you might be entertaining some unconscious bias there. You need to go off of some fact base as well. But if your gut's giving you red flags for whatever reason, I will say always listen to that. Or dig in deeper. If somebody says something that you're like, oh, not sure that would work, maybe ask them a follow-up question about that specific thing.
I know that one of the common practices, at least with online business owners, whether it's employees or contractors, they always want that 2-minute video of like, talk about why you want this role. And, I was reading a thread probably, or something along those lines of like, oh, that's a great way to just find out if you vibe. And then somebody's like, and that's also a great way for your bias to show up. And I was like, thank you. I knew there was something that I didn't like about that practice. One, sometimes people just don't perform well on camera, just staring at a camera like me. Like, I can have a conversation, but you ask me to just talk to a blank screen, it's not going to, my best self is not going to come out. And then you're going to notice, my gender and, do I have tattoos, the color of my skin, how I wear my hair, all of those things are going to show up. And who knows, which one of your unconscious biases might pop up during that process.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. There was, I would say, like, maybe it was pre-pandemic that started to become very popular with like corporate jobs too. Like in interviews, you would have this timer also. That's the other thing. Like, are you kidding me? What a way to set someone up for failure. It's just this like thing counting down. And then once it stops, it's done and you can't do anything. Like, it's terrible. I agree with you completely. I don't recommend that by any means. I understand from a hiring perspective, especially with remote work, it is so difficult for whoever is on the receiving end to get all of those resumes and to really filter through to see who is, qualified, because you receive so many like you could say exactly what you want and people are like, I'm going to reply anyway. And sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. And so like, I understand why people put that in place, but I agree. It's not a good solution. I don't have an incredible solution to fix that, but I know that that's not a good one.
Before we wrap up, what is something that you yourself today as a business owner would tell yourself in your very first few months?
In my very first few months owning my business? Oh my God. Probably that you're capable, right? Like, you're capable of doing this. And it's always going to be a roller coaster of like, someone once told me it's a new devil at every level. Like, and that's what it's like to be a business owner. And I was like, okay, I get that. And now that I know that, I'm here for the ride, right? But I think in the beginning, I kind of thought, I just have to get this first year and then smooth. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. But it's okay. You have good years, you have bad years. As long as you're still enjoying it, it's okay.
Kirsten, where can the audience find you?
Okay, I can be found on my website at kdzhrconsulting.com. I actually have a really great freebie to download, a job description template with some AI prompts. So you can really complete it, based on your business, what you're looking for. So I highly recommend anybody thinking of hiring or who doesn't even have, who's already hired but doesn't have any job descriptions in place, download that freebie. I'm also on Instagram, KDZ_HR Consulting, and LinkedIn. You can find me, Kirsten Ziegler.
Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. This was so fun.
Thanks for hanging out with me on Here's What I Learned. If today's episode gave you an aha moment, a laugh, or something to think about, make sure you're subscribed to my email list. That's where I share even more tips, stories, and behind-the-scenes insights to help you simplify and thrive. And remember, you get to do business and life your way. Until next time, keep experimenting, keep simplifying, and keep learning.